Clay Maddox was a man defined by his singular focus and unwavering precision. With years of experience etched into the lines of his weathered face, he had earned a reputation as a bounty hunter who never missed his mark. Each time he rode out to claim a bounty, he did so with a relentless determination and an unshakable code: no collateral damage, no unnecessary violence. He understood the weight of life and death, having seen enough of both in his time. But it wasn't just skill that set him apart. It was his ability to read people, to understand their motivations and fears, that truly made him a master of his craft. He spent countless nights riding under the stars, memories of past hunts swirling in his mind, each one a reminder of the choices that led him down this solitary path. The thrill of the chase was intoxicating, yet it masked an emptiness that gnawed at him, a longing for something he had chosen to leave behind. When the wanted poster featuring Jonah Vance appeared, it stirred a tempest within him. Jonah was not just another target, he was a ghost from Clay's past, someone whose betrayal had left scars deeper than any bullet wound. As Clay saddled up and headed towards Redwater, anticipation and dread flickered in his chest, signaling a confrontation with not just Jonah, but with the life he had turned his back on. The sun dipped low on the horizon as he approached the town, casting long shadows that mirrored the uncertainty in his heart. This time, however, he wasn't just hunting for vengeance. He was about to step into a world where family ties could either bind him or break him. Little did he know, the arrival in Redwater would challenge everything he believed about loyalty and redemption. The dusty streets of the small town were quiet, but the pulse of anticipation thrummed loudly in Clay Maddox's chest as he sat alone in a dimly lit saloon. The crumpled wanted poster lay on the table before him like a specter, its ink still fresh against the faded wood. Jonah Vance's face stared back at him, a haunting reminder of choices made and paths diverged. Memories surged, uninvited and raw, laughter shared under starlit skies, friendship forged in youth, and betrayal that had carved an unfillable void in his heart. Clay reached for the poster, his fingers brushing against Jonah's likeness, triggering visions of their past, their dreams twisted into nightmares by a single act of treachery. That moment had set Clay on his solitary path as a bounty hunter, chasing shadows rather than facing his demons. Now, with the flicker of hope mingling with resentment, he felt compelled to solve this unfinished business. The journey to Redwater was not merely about the bounty, it was an expedition into his own soul. He could almost hear Jonah's voice teasing him about old times, but now it was laced with bitterness. Clay couldn't shake the feeling that this man, once a brother in arms, now represented everything he had turned away from, the very essence of a life lived recklessly. With resolve hardening in his gut, Clay finished his whiskey and tossed some coins onto the bar. It was time to saddle up. The sun hung low in the sky as he stepped outside, casting elongated shadows that danced across the ground like ghosts from his past. As he mounted his horse and set off toward Redwater, uncertainty loomed large. Could he confront Jonah without losing himself in that turbulent history? Was this journey meant to end blood debts or repurpose them? The sun dipped deeper into the horizon as he rode out into the open plains, leaving behind not just a town but parts of himself he feared might forever remain lost. As Clay rode toward Redwater, memories of Jonah Vance flooded his mind like a relentless tide. Once they had been inseparable, two idealistic young men with dreams of adventure and camaraderie that transcended the small town they called home. They roamed the hills together, sharing laughter and secrets, forging a bond that felt unbreakable. But that bond had shattered when ambition turned into betrayal. It was a fateful night that changed everything. A robbery gone wrong set them on opposite paths. Clay chose loyalty and honor while Jonah succumbed to greed and desperation, leading to a rift that tore through their friendship like a bullet tearing through flesh. The moment Jonah turned against Clay was like a knife twisting deeper, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Memories of shared laughter morphed into haunting echoes of mistrust, with the ghost of their friendship lingering in every shadow. For years, Clay had buried those memories beneath layers of dust and pain, pursuing bounties and chasing down criminals as a means to forget. Yet Jonah's name resurfacing on the wanted poster felt less like a call to action and more like an invitation to confront a long-avoided reckoning. He knew that finding Jonah meant exploring the remnants of their history, a tangled web of emotions and unresolved conflicts. As he approached the outskirts of Redwater, Clay's heart raced with conflicting emotions, anger mixed with disappointment, nostalgia tinged with bitterness. What had once been a brotherhood now felt tainted by betrayal. Jonah not only represented a past Clay wished to escape, but also the very essence of what he feared he might become if he followed in his footsteps. Clenching the reins, Clay tightened his resolve. He wasn't just heading into town to settle a score, he was embarking on a quest to reconcile with his past one way or another. The stakes were high. Could he face Jonah without being consumed by the darkness that had engulfed their shared history? This journey would either be about redemption or revenge, and the lines between the two were as blurred as the sunset on the horizon. As Clay rode into Redwater, the anxiety in the air was palpable. The once familiar town felt foreign, its streets filled with a sense of foreboding that was hard to ignore. Tattered banners fluttered in the evening breeze, and the murmurs of anxious townsfolk reached him even before he entered the main square. It wasn't just the shadows of his past that weighed heavily on him, it was the unmistakable tension that engulfed Redwater, the kind that foreshadowed chaos. Clay dismounted and took a moment to absorb his surroundings. The storefronts, once vibrant with life, now donned a guarded demeanor. Windows were shuttered and faces peered out with a mixture of fear and determination. Rumors of a gang threatening to overrun the town had spread like wildfire, sending residents into a state of frantic preparation. He could see groups of men huddled together, discussing strategies in hushed voices, their postures rigid and wary. The community that had seemed so inviting in his youth now brimmed with uncertainty. As he walked further into town, the weight of responsibility settled on Clay's shoulders. This was no longer just about hunting Jonah, it was about helping a community that was on the brink of collapse. The stakes had changed drastically, and his heart raced at the thought of getting involved. But how? He was an outsider, a bounty hunter who had abandoned this place and its people. The sight of new deputy badges glinting in the fading sunlight reminded him of his own son's potential role in this conflict, adding another layer of complexity to his return. Clay felt an unsettling mix of pride and dread wash over him as whispers of the impending confrontation echoed through his mind. The stakes were high. If he chose to stand by his son and the townsfolk, it would mean confronting not only the dangers posed by the gang but also the ghosts of his past that threatened to haunt him anew. With newfound resolve, Clay steeled himself for what lay ahead. Redwater was facing a battle, and whether he liked it or not, he was drawn into its depths, where loyalty, courage, and perhaps redemption awaited him amidst the looming darkness. Clay entered the sheriff's office, a place now buzzing with the anxious energy of deputies and townsfolk preparing for an uncertain future. The air was thick with tension, but it wasn't just the threat of the gang that gripped him, it was the lingering question of Jonah Vance's whereabouts. He approached the desk, where a young deputy was poring over papers, and inquired about Jonah. "Where, Vance?" "The wanted poster had him listed as in town," Clay pressed, his heart pounding at the thought that he might finally come face to face with his past. The deputy looked up, concern etched across his features. "He disappeared a few days back. No one knows where he went. Some folks think he skipped town to avoid trouble, while others think, well, they think he might be hiding from something worse than just the law." Clay felt a jolt of disappointment mixed with intrigue. How could Jonah have vanished so completely? Had he really turned to cowardice, running away as chaos descended upon Redwater, or was he tangled up in something deeper, an issue so severe that it necessitated his disappearance? As he absorbed this new information, Clay's mind raced through possibilities, each more troubling than the last. Their history flooded him with questions. If Jonah was in danger or caught up with the gang threatening Redwater, what choices had led him to this moment? Clay couldn't shake the feeling that he had lost his chance to resolve their contentious past. Realizing that finding Jonah was now intertwined with his return to Redwater and his role as a father, Clay felt an urgency swell within him. He needed to uncover Jonah's fate, not only for closure but also because doing so could mean saving both a long-lost friend and perhaps redeeming himself in the process. Determined to chase down leads of Jonah's whereabouts, Clay set off into town, ready to delve into its secrets while wrestling with the weight of unresolved feelings about his former friend. The stakes had risen, demanding more than just his skills as a bounty hunter. They called for clarity amidst a tangled web of past loyalties and present dangers. Clay's search for Jonah Vance took an unexpected turn as he stepped out of the sheriff's office. A commotion at the far side of the square caught his attention, an altercation brewing between a group of townsfolk and one of the deputies. As Clay approached, he recognized the figure commanding their attention. It was his son, now a young deputy, standing tall and resolute amidst the chaos. The sight struck Clay like lightning. 12 years had passed since he last laid eyes on his son, and the boy he once knew had transformed into a capable young man, his face marked by both determination and the weight of responsibility. Yet Clay could sense an undercurrent of tension in the air. The reactions of those around him hinted at an unspoken history that hung heavily between them. "Look out, this isn't a rodeo," his son shouted, his voice firm yet laced with frustration. Clay watched as the boy-turned man managed to defuse the situation with measured authority. Pride swelled inside him, but it quickly twisted into unease. After years of absence, what right did he have to feel proud? Once the dust settled, Clay hesitated before stepping forward. As their eyes met, a flicker of recognition danced across his son's face, quickly replaced by uncertainty. "Dad," his voice was barely above a whisper, filled with disbelief and unvoiced feelings. A wave of emotions crashed over Clay, remorse for years lost and the realization that their reunion would not be easy. "Yeah, it's me," he replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. "What are you doing here?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. There was no mistaking the mix of resentment and curiosity in his son's tone. It pierced through Clay's defenses. "I came looking for someone," he said carefully, unsure whether to mention Jonah or dive into what felt like years of guilt. They were strangers bound by blood, not just a father and son, but echoes of lives that had drifted apart. As awkward silence enveloped them, each seeking connection but trapped in uncharted waters, Clay felt the weight of their estranged relationship pressing down on him. The reality soon set in. They needed to address their past while confronting present dangers together. This reunion held promises of healing, but also foreshadowed inevitable confrontations that could either fortify their bond or break it irreparably. As Clay and his son stood in the bustling sheriff's office, the weight of their years apart hung heavily in the air. Each attempt at conversation felt like navigating a minefield, fraught with unspoken grievances and the burden of absence. Clay could see the questions swirling in his son's eyes, questions that he himself had avoided for too long. How could he explain why he had left, why he hadn't been there to guide him through the tumultuous years of adolescence? "You missed a lot, Dad," his son finally said, breaking the silence that had settled uncomfortably between them. The words were sharp, filled with a mix of hurt and accusation, cutting deeper than any physical confrontation Clay had faced as a bounty hunter. "I know," Clay replied, his voice low and steady despite the turmoil churning inside him. "And I can't change that, but I'm here now." "Here now," the skepticism in his son's tone was almost palpable. "What does that even mean? Are you just going to disappear again once this is all over?" That comment struck Clay hard. He realized that while he may have returned physically, emotionally he had a long way to go to bridge the chasm created by his absence. "I understand why you feel that way," he said softly, searching for the right words. "I don't expect you to trust me overnight." A flicker of vulnerability crossed his son's face before it was quickly masked by defiance. "Trust is earned, not given." The truth in those words resonated with Clay. They were a reflection of his own life's experiences. Just as he had fought hard for every bounty, he would have to fight just as fiercely for this relationship. As they began to talk more openly about their feelings and fears, Clay sensed an inch of connection forming between them, tempered by the reality that both would need to confront their pasts if they hoped to build something new together. With each shared moment, it became clear that their reunion was not merely about rekindling lost time, but rather navigating an intricate path toward understanding and healing. The stakes were high. They were bound by blood but also by unresolved emotions and unforgiving truths that would require both courage and honesty to overcome as they faced the impending dangers together. The tension in Redwater escalated as reports of the marauding gang spread through the town like wildfire. Clay Maddox could feel the weight of his choices pressing down on him, a fraying rope that threatened to snap at any moment. As he stood alongside his son, the new deputy, preparing for the inevitable conflict, he found himself at a crossroads. The wanted poster of Jonah Vance lingered in his mind, an unresolved thread that tugged at his conscience amidst the chaos. The town was buzzing with frantic energy. Deputies were rallying together, barricading streets and arming themselves for the imminent fight. Clay saw the determination in his son's eyes, a reflection of his own resolve from years past. But this time, Clay wasn't just fighting for a bounty. He was fighting for the safety of the community and the bond he was desperately trying to rebuild. Yet with every passing moment, the call of the bounty echoed in his mind. Jonah's disappearance only deepened the mystery. What if tracking him down could lead to answers about the gang's motivations? Clay felt torn between pursuing Jonah and standing by his son's side. Could he truly abandon his son in a time of need to chase after a ghost from his past? "Dad, we need you," his son urged, noticing Clay's momentary hesitation. Those words resonated deeply within him, stirring feelings of guilt and longing. In that instant, Clay realized he couldn't turn his back on the very family he had fought so hard to reconnect with. The dilemma weighed heavily. Honor the man he used to be by chasing after bounties, or embrace the man he wanted to become, one who faced his fears and protected those he loved. As shouts from townsfolk grew louder, signaling that the gang was closing in, Clay knew what he had to do. He turned to his son, determination etched on his features. "Let's defend this town together," he said, a newfound clarity in his voice. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time in years, Clay felt anchored, not as a solitary bounty hunter, but as a father ready to stand by his son in the face of adversity. Together, they would confront both the gang and their shared past, forging a new legacy bound by courage and loyalty. With the gang's threat looming, Clay Maddox found himself in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Standing side by side with his son who had grown into a capable deputy, he couldn't help but reflect on his own life choices. Years spent chasing after bounties had filled his pockets but left an aching void in his heart, a void now magnified by the presence of the son he had left behind. As Clay tightened his grip on the rifle slung over his shoulder, he fought back the memories of missed birthdays and empty chairs at dinner tables. Each bounty claimed had come at a price. The relentless pursuit of criminals meant abandoning those he loved. How could he call himself a father when the only legacy he seemed to be leaving was one of absence and regret? He studied his son's determined face, features reminiscent of his late mother, and felt an overwhelming urge to shield him from harm. This boy hadn't just become a man during their years apart. He was now part of a community that depended on him. Clay's instinct as a bounty hunter warred with the deep-rooted responsibility that surged within him, the urge to protect, to nurture, and to stand firm against the darkness threatening their home. "Listen," Clay said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "This town needs us, and I want you to know that I'm here for you now." The sincerity in his declaration was cut through by lingering doubts, but there lingered the haunting question. If it came down to choosing between hunting down Jonah or standing by his son in defense of Redwater, what kind of legacy would he leave? Would he honor his instincts as a hunter or embrace this chance for redemption as a father? The clarity began to dawn upon him like the first light breaking over the horizon, a realization that being present for his son amid chaos could redefine everything he believed about himself. In this moment of strife, with loyalty in question and bravery required, perhaps it was not just about defending against external threats, but also about battling the demons within. Resolute in purpose, Clay steeled himself for whatever was to come, committed to writing a new chapter, not just in his life but in theirs together. The tension in Redwater reached a boiling point as the gang's presence became increasingly menacing, their activities escalating with each passing hour. Clay and his son, now united in their shared purpose, stood at the forefront of the town's defense. They needed to strategize quickly. The clock was ticking and the safety of their community hung in the balance. Clay paced back and forth in the sheriff's office, his mind racing through various scenarios. "We need to set up patrols along the main roads leading into town," he suggested, turning to his son. "If we can anticipate their movements, we might be able to catch them off guard." His son nodded, a determined glint in his eye. "I can organize the deputies into teams. We'll cover more ground that way." Clay appreciated the initiative. It reminded him of his own youthful eagerness before life's complications had turned him into a solitary hunter. "And we should prepare a fallback plan," he added. "If things go south, we need a safe point for everyone to regroup." As they laid out their plans, Clay felt a sense of camaraderie forming between them, a partnership built not just on blood but on necessity and trust forged through shared danger. Each idea exchanged was a step toward healing their fractured relationship, as they blended Clay's experience as a bounty hunter with his son's training as a lawman. "I'll take the western perimeter," Clay proposed, recalling his years tracking down elusive targets. "I know how to navigate that terrain." You can handle the east side with the deputies. Let also set up barricades at key entry points, his son added, excitement lacing his voice. We can use whatever we have, crates, wagons, anything to slow them down. As they worked together, Clay found himself feeling more connected to his son than he had for years. The urgency of the situation forced them to communicate openly, not just about tactics but about their lives and aspirations. In this moment of crisis, they were no longer father and estranged son, they were allies fighting for a common cause. With their strategy taking shape, Clay felt a renewed sense of purpose growing within him. The impending confrontation with the gang was not merely about survival, it was an opportunity to redefine his legacy. Standing beside his son, ready to defend their town together, Clay understood that this battle extended beyond external threats. It was a chance to reclaim the relationship he had once thought irreparably damaged. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had the potential for redemption. As Clay and his son prepared for the impending confrontation with the gang, an unexpected alliance began to form among the local townsfolk. United by a shared determination to protect their home, residents stepped forward, offering support and resources to bolster their defenses. The bartering of goods and skills transformed the sheriff's office into a bustling hub of activity, where each contribution became a thread woven into the fabric of their community's resilience. Clay watched as one by one, neighbors he had known in his youth offered to help fortify the town. Old friends and new faces alike rallied together, reinforcing barricades and stocking supplies. A seasoned blacksmith volunteered to forge makeshift weapons. Farmers brought in pitchforks and tools, repurposing them for defense. The air buzzed with a newfound energy that invigorated Clay and his son, affirming that they were not alone in this battle. Together we stand a chance, Clay said, addressing the crowd gathered outside the sheriff's office. His voice carried a weight of conviction that resonated through the townsfolk. We've faced struggles before, but we've always come through stronger. This time will be no different. His son nodded, glancing around at their neighbors. People who had once merely been familiar faces were now allies united in purpose. Clay felt a swell of pride as he observed the collective spirit igniting hope among them. This alliance was more than just a response to danger. It was a revival of community ties that had weathered years of hardship. As strategies were discussed and plans solidified, Clay realized how layered this moment was. While he had come to reclaim his relationship with his son, he was also rediscovering his connection with Redwater itself, a town that thrived on resilience and togetherness. With each passing hour, Clay sensed that this fight against the gang was not just about survival, it was about restoring the very essence of their community. In standing shoulder to shoulder with his son and their neighbors, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, not just as a bounty hunter or estranged father, but as a vital part of something greater than himself. Together they would confront adversity head-on, embodying the strength of unity in the face of chaos. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a crimson hue over the town, the showdown with the gang loomed like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Clay Maddox and his son stood shoulder to shoulder, flanked by the townsfolk who had come together in solidarity. The air crackled with tension, and a collective determination surged among them, their hearts beating as one against the impending threat. Clay scanned the dilapidated buildings lining Main Street, the gathering of townspeople armed with makeshift weapons and unyielding spirit. He could feel the weight of responsibility resting heavily on his shoulders, but he was no longer bearing it alone. As he exchanged glances with his son, there was an understanding. This battle was not just for survival, but a test of their loyalty and bravery. When the gang finally appeared, a menacing wave of faces emerging from the shadows, Clay's instincts kicked in. "Stay calm, remember your training," he shouted, rallying both deputies and citizens alike. His son mirrored his resolve, stepping forward as the new deputy who had earned respect despite his youth. "On my mark," Clay called out as they positioned themselves behind hastily erected barricades. A tense silence enveloped them as they awaited the inevitable clash, each member of the community reflecting upon their own stakes in this fight, from old friends seeking refuge to families defending their homes. As gunfire erupted and chaos ensued, Clay felt a primal instinct surging within him, honed through years as a bounty hunter. Yet this time it was different. Every shot fired was not just about claiming a bounty, but about protecting his son and the town he had long abandoned emotionally. Each face in the crowd became a source of strength as their few remaining shouts echoed against the backdrop of chaos. In that moment, amid flying debris and echoes of gunfire, Clay fought not only against the gang but for forging new bonds with his son and reclaiming his place within this community. Their familial ties became their armor against external threats, and within that battlefield forged by necessity and courage, Clay recognized that true legacy lay in unity, in standing firm together against adversity as a family and as a community. With each adversary taken down or repelled by their tenacity, Clay felt that deeper connections were being formed, not solely between father and son but among everyone willing to fight for Redwater. The confrontation was fierce, but it solidified more than just physical strength. It reaffirmed that love, loyalty, and bravery could indeed overcome any darkness threatening their town. As the dust began to settle from the fierce battle, Clay Maddox stood among the remnants of a town that had weathered yet another storm. The echoes of gunfire faded, and in their place lingered a profound silence that spoke volumes. He felt the weight of his past decisions pressing down on him heavily, but as he glanced at his son, who now bore the marks of a hero, the path forward started to become clearer. Clay knew he had fought bravely not only to protect Redwater, but also to reclaim his role in his son's life. The sense of unity they had forged amidst chaos had been transformative. It was an awakening for both father and son. But now came the time for introspection. He needed to think deeply about what it meant to be a father and how he could contribute meaningfully to his son's life moving forward. In the aftermath of victory, Clay gathered the townspeople together, including his son, under the warm glow of lanterns flickering against twilight. "Today we stood together against darkness," he began, his voice steady as it carried through the gathered crowd. "But as we rebuild our lives in this community, I must accept that my absence has left scars." His son looked up with understanding, recognizing the weight behind his words. "I'm here now," Clay continued, glancing into his son's eyes with earnestness. "I want to be part of your life, truly part of it this time." While uncertainty still loomed in Clay's mind regarding Jonah Vance and what lay ahead for them both, his commitment to protecting their bond became paramount. The realization settled within him: embracing vulnerability would be key to mending their relationship. As they discussed plans for building defenses against possible future threats together, Clay's heart swelled with hope. He understood that his own journey was intertwined with that of Redwater's resilience, a legacy he wished to restore through acts of courage, love, and accountability. In reconciling with his past mistakes and stepping into a future filled with potential for connection and healing, Clay found clarity. It was not merely about safeguarding their town, but becoming an active participant in nurturing familial ties that could stand firm against any adversity. This newfound resolve filled him with purpose, one that would see him not only as a protector of Redwater, but as a loving and present father determined to leave behind a legacy defined by strength and unity. With the dust settled and the echoes of gunfire fading, Clay Maddox stood before the townsfolk of Redwater, reflecting on the journey that had led him to this moment. The battle against the gang had been fierce, but it was clear that the true fight lay not just in defending their homes, but in reconciling the past and embracing newfound responsibilities. As he surveyed the faces around him, neighbors who had once been distant and now felt like family, Clay felt a swell of gratitude. They had faced adversity together, and through it all, he recognized that blood ties held significance, but it was their collective actions that spoke volumes. Forgiveness would not come easily. It would require effort from everyone involved, especially from him. "Today we defended our town," Clay began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "But we must also confront our own histories. I know my absence has caused pain." He glanced at his son, who nodded with understanding and support. "I want to honor my commitment to this community and to you all, to be present, not just as a protector but as a father." The townsfolk listened intently, recognizing not just words of remorse but a promise for change. Clay understood that actions would ultimately define his legacy. He couldn't undo the years lost, nor could he erase the scars left by his choices, but he could choose to be there moving forward. As plans were laid for rebuilding efforts throughout Redwater, Clay made a silent vow to engage with his son in this process, forging a relationship built on trust rather than distance. In unifying their community, they would create a sanctuary against future threats. In those moments of reflection and resolution, Clay fully grasped what redemption meant for him. It wasn't simply about guarding against external dangers, but also about cultivating a nurturing environment where love thrived alongside resilience. He knew that while forgiveness might take time, every step towards healing was worth pursuing. With renewed purpose and determination coursing through him, Clay Maddox embraced his dual role as protector of Redwater and devoted father, ready to shape a future defined by courage and unity, where both blood ties and actions intertwined to create an unbreakable bond within their community.